As of Gran Turismo 7's 1.34 update, which arrived on May the 25th, the ability to swap out your car's ordinary engine for something a bit more potent has become more widely available, if a little bit on the expensive side. With just over 75 different ways to implement engine upgrades, there's a lot of potential expense. And while most engine swaps are worthwhile ones, the fact is you can burn a lot of hard to obtain cash if you're not building cars you're going to get a lot of use out of. It's with this in mind that we've put together a short list of the 5 best engine swaps to perform in Gran Turismo 7, as well as one you're probably best avoiding unless you've got a masochistic streak. One of our very favourites here at GTPlanet is actually a pretty recent addition to the game, with the new Mazda 3 hatchback getting an absolutely incredible new soundtrack. While the 3's Skyactiv X engine is praiseworthy for its unique technology, the 177 horsepower hatchback is brisk at best. That all changes though when you fit the screaming quad-rotor engine from Mazda's Le Mans winning 787B race car. As standard, this swap gifts the car with 690 brake horsepower, and it has all-wheel drive. The hatch actually copes pretty well with it as well. You can also tune it up to almost 1,000 horsepower, but you'd best fit carbon brakes and some sticky tyres to deal with that. One downside is that unless you have a spare engine ticket sitting about, the swap is one of the most expensive of all and will cost you 1.2 million credits. This one is another combination of an all-wheel drive hatchback and a particularly powerful motor, though it's a little bit more attainable and even downright sensible. Of course, the Ford Focus RS is no slouch as standard with 350 horsepower from its 2.3 litre EcoBoost engine, making it one of the hottest hatches around. That means the V8 swap from a Group 3 race car is actually a mild gain by comparison, with just under 600 horsepower as standard. It's plenty to see off the competition in the Tokyo Expressway WTC 600 event though, and you can give it some other choice upgrades, brakes, gearbox, tyres, and still fit under the 600 performance points event limit. Better still, it only costs you 700,000 credits to install, so it'll pay for itself in one race. There's 3 key car swaps in the game, each resulting in some good fun machines, but Gran Turismo 7's own hot coffee mod is our pick of them. It takes a classic cappuccino and gives it some very tasty rotary goodness. With just 292 horsepower as standard, it's one of the lowest powered engine swaps, but then that does represent almost 5 times the power of the original car. There's a mild weight penalty, but still the result has 400 horsepower per tonne, and far more power is available as well on top of that. It also has a surprisingly low performance points rating, and at 225,000 credits to do the swap, if you don't have a ticket, you'll have cash left over. After a little bit of tuning, for example you'll want to lengthen the gearbox for starters, it's another great car for the WTC 600 race at Tokyo, and a bargain at that as well. Also, it makes rotary noises, always a winner. Have you ever wished you could go back in time and fix a mistake? Well, with GT7's DMC DeLorean S2, itself an interesting anachronism, you can, well not with the car but with the engine. Famously, the original DeLorean used a rear-mounted V6 developed in a shared initiative between Peugeot, Renault and Volvo, hence the PRV name. However, the 2.9 litre lump produced an absolutely pathetic 130 horsepower. It's unlikely to have hit 88 miles an hour in a mall parking lot or a town centre street. Gran Turismo 7 gives you the option of slipping something a lot more capable under the glass engine cover by the way of the Roadster Shop Rampage's modified Chevrolet LS7 unit for 250,000 credits. This gives it the 748 brake horsepower standard output of the GT award-winning SEMA car, and that can even be wound up further to 1100 horsepower. You'll need some softer tyres of course and tweaks to the gearbox and brakes, but it's a surprisingly tractable machine considering that incredible bump in power. The TTS R8 option makes our list because in a sea of madcap high-powered swaps, it's actually one of the most sensible, if you ignore all the mechanical challenges that would come into play trying to squeeze one of these engines into a TTS. It's not a huge power bump, with the stock engine adding just over 100 horsepower to the TT and bringing it closer to the TTR power levels. That means you actually need to do relatively little to it after splashing out just over 180,000 credits for the swap. Of course, there's still plenty of scope for getting even more out of it, with around 800 horsepower available, if you want to splash some more cash that is. But if you just want a nicer sounding, quicker TT, you can't go wrong here, especially if you have the engine for free and a roulette ticket as well. On the face of it, this seems like one of the greatest ideas anyone's ever had. The Turbo K20 swap is about as cheap as they get at 127,500 credits, and it garnishes the little Fiat 500 based Abarth with 10 times its standard power. In fact, it's almost a dead match for a 4th generation Ariel Atom, which uses the same engine at 315 horsepower and around 580 kilos. However, dead is the operative word. The 500 was never designed for a 4-cylinder engine representing a full 20% of its weight to hang out the back, and combined with its ancient basic suspension and a wheelbase no longer than a reasonably tall person, it's a disaster to drive. That's not to say it's impossible to tame, and you'll find many people trying in our GT7 tuning forum, but the effort, we think, is best spent elsewhere, particularly if you're hoping to give it more power, because it goes to over 550 brake horsepower, and you'll need more grip to compete in money-spinning races, as it tends to roll over with little to no provocation. There's 4 other options for this engine, and quite frankly, each of them a better choice. And that is just the tip of the iceberg, just a handful of the engine swaps available now in Gran Turismo 7, and you can find more in our dedicated forum thread. Polyphony Digital adds around 5 more for each update as well, so make sure you do keep an eye on the forums, and maybe some will pop up that really take your fancy. As for now, that's all from me, so happy tuning everybody, and we'll see you again very, very soon.